Hey, what's up? My name's Thomas. I'm the author of the file. The first thing you're going to notice when you open it up is that we're within the main comp. And think of the main comp as the building block layer that you're going to be putting all the different modular elements within and then doing your final render from. Within the main comp is the controller layer. And when we select the effects controls, you're going to notice that the background color is here, as well as all the main color settings for the project and some details within the project, like the text color and the flare color. So if you want to more customize that within your awards show. The next thing you're going to notice is the curves controller. And I used a dual curves on this to really fine tune the curves. And then we have the 4-color gradient controller. And this is basically the lighting on the top and the bottom are coming from, the main color is coming from this. And so for example, if we change this to blue, the whole project we can see is affected by that. So that's how you would achieve the two multiple color look, is by adjusting these and the positioning of these. So let's undo that and scroll down, and you're going to notice that we have a couple transitions, and then we have all of our modular elements below that. So that basically covers all of the overview things. Also, you want to take note too, within the project panel, there are some other elements such as the assets. All your assets can be found within this folder. And then we have the demo settings. I'm going to go over that in more detail in the next tutorial. But then we have all of the main components that make up awards show. So if you ever want to reference any of those within there. Alright, so let's dig into the intro in the next tutorial. In this video, we're going to be going over the intro comps. And within the intro comps, we have two different versions. We have the intro 5-second version, which the text moments are 5 seconds, and we have the intro extended, where the text moments are 8 seconds long. From the main comp, if you click into intro 1, you'll see that, and I'll enlarge this just a little bit and remove this panel. You'll see that we have 6 different text moments within the comp, and the comps almost always are 20 seconds long in their loops, in their cycles. If you see on the top layer, we have a curves and we have a 4-color gradient. Now, if we go to the effects and controls and you try and edit these, it won't work because they're referencing the main comp's curves controller. So if you want to edit the curves, you'll have to edit the main comp's curves within that. And the same goes for the 4-color gradient. Now, users before version 2.1 will notice that this looks a little different than it did before. And within this version, I added the ability to, if you go to the controller and you scroll down, to CC color correct within comps. If we disable that, it doesn't look like anything happened. But if we click into the intro, again, you'll see that it looks significantly different. And this is what users before that version saw. And the reason I did that is because if you go to main, remember how I said that you want to do all your final rendering from here? Well, I could very quickly see a problem arising that people would select the curves in this layer and adjust it and not adjust the curves in intro 2, and then they would get a pop between the two comps. And so to avoid that, I had all the color correction being done from this main layer. But a lot of people asked for that ability in the other comps to just be able to quickly render intro 1 and nothing else, and the ability to be able to see what the final is going to look like. So I answered. And now if you go back to the controller and we'll enable that checkbox, now you can see exactly what the final is going to look like within that comp. If we go down to the next layer, we'll have the bokeh, and this is also on a loop, and we have the text layers. Now the text layers, if we go into them, you'll see that they're doing a couple of effects within there. And the really cool thing is that with this setup, I used presets from After Effects on the text so that you can go in and very simply just put in your text however you want it, and then it simply replaces it with your text with the text fading in and fading out. Now, the only thing is there is no easy way to get the glowing to hit the spots you want with a preset. Unfortunately, I looked, trust me. And so what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to go in individually and move the glowing layers to where the corners are of your text. So that's pretty straightforward for the intro text. Now let's go back, and you can see below that we have the short strings, and these are pre-rendered backgrounds. If I turn it on and off, you can see that these strings are pre-rendered. And if you disable shy layers, you'll see that below that we have the actual short strings particles that were rendered. Now, I did this to save you a significant render time. You can customize the look of these however you'd like, but this was more so to have you not take the render hit for the depth of field that's happening with the particle strings. So just know that you probably don't ever have to worry about any of these layers. And you'll also note that all of these text moments are parented. They're parented to layer 13, the position controller. And if we hit P on there, you'll notice that the Z position goes from 0 and it goes up to, well, back to minus 1,000. So it's moving 1,000 pixels in Z position in space. So that's important to note for if you want to ever edit the position of the intro text moments. I set this up so that you won't have to create duplicates. So if we go into intro 5 second, for example, and twirl that down, and I'll just make this larger for a second. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take all the layers and move them over. And I'm also going to move over the transitions. Now, what you're going to want to do is go to intro 5 second and then go to intro 3. And you can stack up a whole bunch of intros onto here. And then within there, these will all work back to back to back. And it works out really well for people, so they have the least amount of work to do possible. All you have to do is just go in and within all the different intro text moments, change the text to whatever you'd like it to be. All right, so then the next thing I want to go over is that the intro text within the demo comp, I actually have the 5 second version and the 8 second version within the same comp, and you can definitely do that with your own. From the feedback that I received in the previous versions, some people found this method to be a little bit advanced, so that's just a forewarning. But if you would like to have 8 second moments within the 5 second comps, because I actually did do that in the demo. Like I had some quicker text moments, but then for the actual intro or the title, I had that 8 seconds. So how you would do that is you would just go to intro text extended within that comp, select that, and now we're going to replace where you would like it to be at. So for example, if you would like it to be the second text moment. And what you're going to want to do is have both of them highlighted, the new intro text extended 1 and intro text 2. And then what you're going to do is on a Mac, you're going to hold Option. On a PC, I think it's Control or Command, one of the two. And you're going to highlight them both and drag while holding Option on a Mac and drop it on top of there. And that's replacing it with the new file. Now you'll notice that you'll have to extend out this part right here, and then you're going to want to delete that. Now the last thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to make sure that since the depth of field is enabled on these text moments, you're going to want to change the camera mode to top. And within top, you can see that we have the camera highlighted right now. And if you hit Command semicolon, that turns on the rulers. And within this part, now, the ruler that I have set up here is kind of the exact center position where the text moment is at its sharpest with its depth of field. So if we go to the middle of that layer, we want to make sure that that part is hitting on the center within the median of the time of it being on screen. Now if we go back to active camera, and you can scale this layer down or scale the text down to however you would like it. And there is one more thing you're going to want to note with this as well though. If you hit U on the command, you'll see that we have an opacity keyframe setup, and you're just going to want to slide that to the end. And that's how you would, for example, add a loop into there. Now, a lot of people are going to ask with this, how do I add another intro onto the 7 that we already have set up? Say you want it to go up to 10. You can definitely do that. And this kind of goes for the slideshow as well, and the generic text moments, that if you want to create more modular elements, all you're going to want to do is go to the last setup comp and hit Command D, and that will duplicate it, or edit duplicate, and then double click into there, and you'll see that in intro 8 now it has all the same comps as what intro 7 has, and we don't want that. We want it to have new unique comps to edit. If you twirl down the intro text moments, you'll see that all the different intro text comps are within there. And what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to create new ones of those as well. So you'll see that 42 is the last one that was made in intro 7. So we're going to want to make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more. So duplicate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then the first one, because remember how these transition from one to the other. So intro 42 is starting in 7 and it's going to end in 8. So we want to replace this first one with intro text 42. So we're going to use that replace trick again while holding Option on a Mac. We're going to have both of them highlighted and then click and drag and drop it on top of there, and it replaces it with all the same attributes. And then we're going to do that for all of the next 6. And this is exactly how I created all the different pre-made intros and slideshows for you. All right, and then we replace all the following comps with their updated versions. And that is the exact process that you're going to use for all of the different comps. Now it's still going to say intro text 42 because you're going to have to replace that text with your own text. In this video, we're going to be going over the slideshow. And just like the intros, there's actually 2 different versions of this slideshow. There is, and we'll close this, there is the slideshow that has 6-second nominees, we'll call them, and 11-second nominees. And the thing to note about this, and this is very important, is that unlike the intro comps, you cannot mix and match the 11-second with the 6-second versions. It can't be done. So you'll have to know from the very beginning if you like the pace of the 6-second version or if you like the pace of the 11-second version, and go with that for the entire length of the actual slideshow that you're using. Now, that's not to say that you can't have a slideshow that's 6 seconds and then a category announcing the grand nominees, and then have those be 11 seconds. But just know that it's something that you can't change there, because a lot of people were confused about that in previous versions, and I just want to clarify that. If we go into a slideshow and we will remove the paragraph panel again, you'll see that the very first one has the text placeholder at 4 seconds. And the reason I did that was just because I didn't want one to start halfway through right here, like it would be in slideshow 2, for example. You can see that that's continuing. That's the last half of placeholder 4 and text 4. So in slideshow 1, you'll see that it's exact same setup as it was in the intro. We have the curves, we have the 4-color gradient, we have the bokeh layer, we have then a text and a placeholder layer. Now the text layer is exactly the same except for it does have this nice divider between the two. But all you'll have to do is just replace this text with your own, and the optional text, if you want it or not, just turn it off. And if we go back, you'll see that you can very simply just take your image and put it in here. And let's just do that for example. We'll take a stock image. I used the images from unsplash.com, and we'll just switch it out with this desk. And then what you're going to want to do is see it's much larger than the 1920 by 1080. So we hit S for scale, and then we're going to scale that down to fit within there. And now if we go back, now it's replaced and updated with our new image. And you can do that with a video. You can do it with whatever you like within that comp. The other thing to note too is that sometimes images can get really hot or blown out. So what I have set up is, if you go to the effects, I have this curves layer that's bringing the curves down, so it's more easier on the eye. So if you don't like the way the image is looking or the video, this is the main part you want to adjust right here on this curves. And I have, I believe, 7 different comps set up for you already with both the 6-second version, and each one of these has 4, or actually I have a bunch. I have 10 slideshows set up for you, and then 10 slideshow extended versions as well. And so same as before, what you're going to want to do is, when you're ready to put your slideshow in, you're just going to want to butt them up back to back. And I'll make this larger, and I'll pull this back. You're going to take your, so for example, in a real world scenario, you would have your 3-4 nominees in this comp, and then you'd put your 4 through 8 nominees in this comp in slideshow 2. But let's say that you have 13 nominees for your specific award show. You're going to go to main, and then you're going to go to slideshow 3, and you're going to drag that onto the main comp timeline and butt that up right there. Now these two will just seamlessly go into each other. And then you're going to want to replace this with your, so in that example, if you did want 13 exactly, you'd actually have to add another one. So let me go back, and then we're going to add it into slideshow 4. And then click into there, and then you're going to either disable these comps just like that, or what you would probably do is use a transition. We'll use the transition slow, for example, and we'll just move that over to where we want it. And that marker is where the transition point should happen. So we have it going all the way over to here. There. And then you can butt up the category. So we'll just bring this one down. So then this would be a nice transition from one category of slideshow to another. And that's pretty much it for the slideshows. The extended versions are the exact same. They just have 3. They're 11 seconds per nominee versus the 6-second version. And you'll also want to note that these do have shy layers turned on. So if you want to access the particle strings for whatever reason, if you want to customize it however you'd like, that those are within that comp. In this video, we're going to be going over the category and the lower thirds. If we go into the first category, you'll see that we have set up the same as before. We have the curves, the 4-color gradient. We have this new position controller layer within here. And then we have the bokeh, the text. And for the most part, you won't have to worry about any of this stuff. Just note that this position controller, it just creates a little bit of movement within the comp. So it goes from 0 to -300 in Z space back to 0. You can adjust this. You can turn this off if you want to delete that. That'll remove that. It's up to you. To me, it was a little bit better than just having it static on that part. Now with the text on this, you'll see that we have the category 1, and let's go into that text for a minute. You can see that it's the same setup as before. It has the main blur within there. You can edit this to be your text, and then you'll have to edit the different flares on that. And with these different flares, there's actually a couple new ones. There's these particle hotspot loops. And these are just kind of a nice hotspots you can add on the corners that have some particles on them as well. And they just add a really nice look to the overall feel of the award show. And then add some flares on top of them to really have those corners pop. And the side blur, this is something too that just note when you have text that's maybe longer, like your long text. And we'll widen that out. That you're going to want to adjust this. So if we go to the side blur, and you're going to want to make that so that the mask is just hitting the edge of the text. Otherwise, your viewer won't be able to read it. And then obviously adjust the hotspots and flares. So it's just a very minimal amount of work. You can very quickly have this up and running. And you're going to want to move this over as well. This is parented to the position controller, but that doesn't mean you can't move this over. And you might want to move it down. There's a bunch of things you can do to adjust this to your own liking. But in this particular example on categories, I would probably recommend not having too wide of text. So otherwise it gets into this really hot area. And I would probably instead do something more so where the text is down like that. And then you have the optional text moved down. Something like that. And then adjust your flares accordingly. All right, and the other thing we're going to go over is the lower thirds. And the lower thirds are meant to be modular as well. If we go to the generic slideshow plus lower thirds, I'm going to be going over the generic slideshows in the next tutorial, but just know for this one that the generic slideshows are just for extras, for something that you just want, maybe no text, no nothing, just images, like a simple slideshow, maybe before your guests are coming to the award show to play up on there. So if you double click into there, you can see that we have the same setup as what we had for the slideshow, except for instead of text, we have the lower thirds. And note this first pair is turned off for right now, just so that it didn't start with one on. So the middle lower thirds one, for example, if we scale that back, you can see that we have the middle lower thirds, and then on the next one we have the right lower thirds, or left lower thirds, I'm sorry, and then the right lower thirds. Now, how you're going to want to do this in your own compositions is you can either just simply copy and paste these into your own generic slideshows in the future, but really the editing on these is the exact same as all the other ones. All you're going to have to do is just change your text to whatever you would like it to be and adjust the particle or the flares to be in the corners and on your text. And they don't have to be on your text. I just think it looks better to have the flares hitting on the text. Let's go into one of the particle. So for example, with the build of this, we have, if we turn them on and off, you can see that we have this kind of nice horizontal soft glow over the text on the divider. And then we have a horizontal soft or hard, and it's just kind of creating another layer on top of that. And you can see on here that these other dividers are coming from this shape layer. And then we have this smoke loop above it. And that's kind of creating some organic fractal parts, just some really nice, elegant smoke on top of the divider. And then we have the particle wall. And what that is it's just the little particle elements that are happening underneath the divider. And then we have the middle lower thirds text, the particle strings trail. Now, what that means, if we turn that on and off, you can see that we have the particle strings that are flowing behind it. Now, maybe you might think that is too intense. You can turn the opacity of that down if you would like. There is an opacity keyframe on it already, so just take note of that. And then the other thing too is that there's the particle trails too. And I thought that some people might want double the particles and really go all out with that. So if you'd like more particle strings, you can turn this second layer on as well. And it'll double the amount of particles behind the text. And the same thing goes for, if we go back to the lower thirds, for the left and the right are the same, just on opposite sides. We have the blur that's happening on that. If we turn that off, you can see that it's just kind of a nice subtle part that makes it not so harsh, like it's more elegant coming from the side. So you can adjust that however you like with that fast blur. And then we have the couple glows on the dividers and the smoke loop and glow soft, particle strings. So all pretty basic. The text is the exact same as all the other ones you've seen before. That covers everything for the categories and lower thirds. In this video, we're going to be going over the generic slideshows. And just like the other ones, we have two different versions of the generic slideshows. We have one, and if we pull it up in the project panel under generic slideshow, they are both the same. They both only have the option of having the moments with the images 7 seconds, but there are two different versions of how it looks. We have a long strings and a short strings version. If we go into the first long strings version, you can see that, and I'll pull this over, that each one is just a really nice, simple transition from image to image. And all you have to do is just replace these placeholders. Now the short strings, if we go into that, the short strings have just a little bit different look to them. They have a similar to, well, the same as the intro particles, and there's a little bit more hot spots on the top and more particles. So it just depends on what you would like with yours. I would say that the long strings probably is a little bit more subtle than the short strings, but it's up to you, whatever you think looks best. And I created a whole bunch of pre-made generic short and long string versions for you with the placeholders. So similar to the intro of the slideshow, you just have to butt those up within the main comp back to back and replace the images with your text. Let's say, for example, though, you did want to add maybe a lower thirds to this one. I want to go over that with you on this tutorial. If you go to the lower thirds and you go to, it doesn't matter, let's do a left lower thirds, and we'll just say we're on the third one right now. So what you're going to want to do is select that and bring it over to here. So now, just with doing that, you could just say you're done. Like that, the lower thirds is on there. But the only thing that people might notice is that the image is moving, but the lower thirds is not moving with the image. Now that's completely up to you if you want it moving or if you don't want it moving. But what I would recommend is if you do want it to move the same as the image in the background, all you have to do is just change the parenting on. And one more thing, make sure it's in 3D. But now, whoops, something happened. It's not a big deal. Let me show you how to get this to work though. The reason why that's happening is because in 3D space, the lower thirds is behind, even though it's on top of in the layers panel, it's behind the placeholder 5. So we want to bring that forward in Z space until we can see it. So right there. And then we're going to scale it back down. Then I have a little bit of rotation on the x-axis on this if you want that, or if you don't, hit W to rotate the text in 3D space and move that up. Just make sure that the user at any point cannot see the edges of, so like what I mean by that is you wouldn't want it to be like this. That would not be elegant. And then you're set. Great, so the next tutorial, we're going to be going over multiple screens. In this video, we're going to be going over multiple screens, and there's two different versions of this as well. There's the 2-screen version, which looks like this, and then there's the 4-screen version, which looks like this. And these are all set up to be very user-friendly, that all you have to do is just simply go in and edit with your content. So for example, you can see that the setup is the exact same as all the other ones. We have, except for this this to left text 1. So this is where you'll edit your text with whatever you'd like it to say. And then we have the placeholder. And you'll replace that with whatever you'd like on there. So if we go back to there, you can see it starts out with the particle strings. And then the divider comes on and it has the two things come up. And also note that this does end the same way it starts. So it creates a loop. So in the timeline, in the main comp, you could put 2-screen 2, butt it up against there, and it would seamlessly loop. And the exact same thing goes for the 4-screen. All it has is the different text and the different placeholders, and you just have to edit those. These also have the curves on them just like the other ones, so you can just simply modify these if they're too bright or not bright enough. It's however you would like it. In this video, we're going to be going over the closing credits. And with this comp, let's dig into it right away. It has the same setup like we said before. It does have, though, this text credits on here, and this is a really long comp. But I think it makes it really easy to understand that what we're doing in the closing credits is we're just taking this layer and we're moving it up. So as you can see over time, the text is just slowly moving up. And how that's doing that is it's just moving up in the Y position, but there is an expression on this. And the expression that I have set up is loop out. And what that does is it continues the keyframes on. Within the assets file, I added a list of all the definitions and expressions that I used within the project. So definitely check that out for how all the different loop outs work. But with this one, it just continues based on the 2 keyframes that I set. And this works out really well if you want this to go slower or faster. So if you want it to go slower, just take the second keyframe and move it over, and it'll go slower. If you want it to go faster, move it closer to the first keyframe, and it'll go significantly faster. Everything else in here is the same as what we saw before. We have the particle chandeliers, we have the same background. I tried to make this really easy and add a whole bunch of pre-set up comps for you that hopefully you won't even have to make any duplicates. You'll just be able to place the ones that I have set up in your award show and replace it with your images or videos and text and hit render. In this video, I'm just going to go over some quick tips and tricks to help you in your awards show workflow. The first thing that I want to mention, though, is that with this project, I am using 32-bit mode of the color depth. And without getting into too much detail about that, just know that it creates much nicer glowing than 8 or 16-bit, especially when you're dealing with the add blend mode. The next thing that I want to go over is that, and this is just maybe a better word of caution from helping people who have contacted me about some setting issues. I would say don't mess with the curves unless you're really comfortable with After Effects. Because of the fact that it so significantly changes the look of the image. So that's another one. If you're not too comfortable with After Effects, just probably leave the curves alone. Now that brings up the next thing that a lot of people asked me for, was to include the demo settings within the project. So I added those for you as well. If you go to Project and you go to Assets Demo Settings, I have all the settings that I used in here for the different examples. So we have the gold, the blue, that blue, pink, and red, purple, 2-color or multi-tone that I had in the demo. And within those, I just have a couple notes on here I wanted to go over. The first note is that all presets use the same controller setting. What that means is that you don't have to copy any of the settings from the standard controller and paste those into the main. I do have a quick example of each one for you so that you can see what these different settings produce. And then they're all color coordinated, so the gold ones are obviously the gold tags. Now, how do you change the project so it has these settings? What you're going to want to do is go to the first curves in standard curves and copy that, Command C or edit copy, and then go back to your main and then go to the curves controller and then paste that on curves 1. So that'll have the exact same curve setting as what was in the demo. And then same thing goes for the second curves. And bring that over and paste, highlight that and paste that. Now, what happens if you don't highlight it, for example? Then I just go here and I paste it. Well, then it creates a third version, and we don't want a third version. We just want the curves 2 to be replaced with the curves that was used in the demo. So we'll go over one more time. And now I'm actually pasting the standard, what it already has, so that's probably not the best example. I did want to bring this up because this is very important. Take note of this. With the expressions set up on this main layer, if I were to right now change this name from curves 1 to curves 6, it doesn't matter what the name is, there's a bunch of expressions that are being linked to this layer, and they all just updated to the naming convention of curves 6. So they're all referring to this file name, curve 6 now. But if I were to go here and I took this and copied it, and I went back to main and I had this highlighted and I hit paste, I would have a really bad day because it would break all the expressions and it would have a dialog coming up saying that the expression doesn't work. And then whatever expressions were broken would have to manually be re-enabled, which is a very big pain in the butt. My recommendation to you would be to, if you are going to copy and paste the demo settings, to do it right away in the comp. And then once you have the settings that you want, then save it. Because I don't want you to do a whole bunch of work and then go to the demo settings and replace them and break the expressions, and then you have to redo all that work. That's not good. So just note that when you do replace these, that the naming is very important. What you would do in this instance then is you would rename this curve 6, and then, or whatever the name is, and then you can go over and paste that into there, and it won't break any of the expressions. All right, so we're clear on that. Now, the other thing so we'll just do an example of this. So if we go to curves 2 and then we go down and paste that, so we have the exact same settings from the demo for the gold, and then we go to the 4-color gradient, make sure the name's the same, 4-color gradient, copy, and I did make sure they're the same. I just don't want someone to change it and then wonder why it broke. And then main and 4-color gradient, and now we have the exact settings that I used. So that should be everything for the actual demo settings. All right, that is everything I wanted to go over with you guys. It's just those few quick things. All right, thank you guys again very much. Have a great day.